Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Kasia Zmokla. Here you will always find photo editing training and educational videos to help you grow as an artist and photographer. At times, complex dynamic images like this one benefit the most with really simple edits. If you want to learn how to transform your photos with a series of luminosity adjustments, keep watching. Okay, so today we will be working on this photo taken this year in Polish mountains Bieszczady. I've taken this image late September, so I've mentioned in the intro to this video that sometimes when you are working with quite a complex images, really the simpler the workflow is, the simpler the photo editing methods, the better the results. And in case of this image, I'm going to mostly focus on working with light and shadows. So I will have several layers. So let me show you. This is the all amount of layers that we are going to be applying during this edit. However, almost all of them focus purely on luminosity adjustments. So we won't be talking a lot about color, though we will apply a bit of color grading to this image. So if I switch off color grading, this would be the image with original colors. However, I wanted to stylize it a little bit. I wanted to make it a little bit warmer. So this is my color grading, but almost all the layers, they are all about painting with light. They are all about luminosity adjustments. So why I have restricted my editing to luminosity adjustments? So first of all, photography is all about light. And when we have images like this, when basically the data looks good, I'm talking here about the histogram. So if we analyze the starting point, if we analyze the image, looking at our histogram. So this is what we have just as a starting point. This is the raw file, and we can see that the data looks great. The data is very nicely distributed throughout the whole graph. So we have a little bit of gap here to the left. This represents lack of deep shadows. However, I would say that the image doesn't need pushing it towards the darks. It's already very, very contrasty. We have plenty of beautiful midtones here. So this would be the river, and we have quite a bright sky here that needs to be balanced. However, we are not clipping any shadows. If I just switch on my exposure warning, this is my warning. So, okay, we can see that the sky is a little bit too bright. However, I would say that we are clipping only in the red channel. So if we let's just switch off the exposure warning and let's hover over the sky and let's take a look at the color readouts. So if we hover over here trying to find the brightest place, I would say that the brightest would be around 250 in terms of luminosity value. So this is the last numeric value here. So okay, we are fine when it comes to luminosities, so we don't need to worry too much about this. We can fine-tune our luminosities, we can play around, we can start with the base characteristics and with the auto curve. There's no need to manipulate with those settings. So all we need to do when we will be editing this image is to really analyze the composition and really decide where we want to draw the viewer's attention towards, because there are so many elements, there is so much going on that it can be quite confusing. And basically by skillful painting with light, by skillful applying further the lights and shadows, we can make this scene more balanced and just nicer to look at. So as you can see, I have been working a lot with gradients. So when I will be applying my luminosity adjustments, I will be basing on linear and radial gradients. I will apply just a tiny bit of dodging and burning. However, there is really nothing super complex. All I need to do is to just look at the image, analyze it, and decide how to introduce more light to this image, where to keep the shadow, or in which areas make the shadow a little bit deeper, so the light pattern inside this scene will be consistent. So let's take a look again at our final result that we will be working towards during this edit. So we have these beautiful leading lines. So we have the basically shape of the river. We have those stones. Let me maybe take the annotations tool. So we have those beautiful leading lines, very dynamic lines that take our viewer inside the image. We have this river flowing towards the horizon, and we have the trees. So we have another leading lines here, very strong. We have this very strong tree, that branch actually that is visible here. So during this edit we need to analyze all these elements and think how to basically create an order, how to make all of them work in harmony. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to create another clone variant of my image. So let's do just that. And here, okay, let's reset all the adjustments. So I'm going to hit the reset button. And if you just take a look at these two images, I have cropped the scene. So I wanted to keep the emphasis on the beautiful river, on those stones, on these beautiful textures. In the original frame, a lot of space is taken by the sky and the tree, but my decision was to crop the image a little bit tighter and to keep the emphasis on the river, on those stones. So let's just reapply the crop from our edited image, so that way it will be a little bit faster. So I'm just going to super quick jump to my lens corrections tab, and here in the crop, let's just reapply the crop. Okay, perfect. So now we can basically start focusing on our original raw file. Let's just hide the browser so we have a little bit more space to work with. So the other correction that I want to apply right from the beginning is to straighten the horizon. As the image is a little bit tilted, so I think something like this. Okay, it looks a little bit better now, and let's now move over to our exposure tab. Okay, so let's start with our background layer, and here we will again take a look at our histogram, because you can see that the histogram actually has changed a little bit after I have cropped the image. So before we had this gap of information here. Let me just show you this so you won't have to believe what I'm saying. We can just check it in action. So we have these two images, one beside another. On this one, I'm going to reset the crop. So you can see that when the image is not cropped, the histogram looks a little bit different. So this is the difference between this one and this one. The difference is very, very small. However, the data shapes just a little bit differently. So this is just to show you that these things happen when you are cropping. So okay, let's maybe go for something more extreme. If I take my crop tool and let's go for unconstrained. So if I would crop something like this, and let's apply. So now we can see that this affected the histogram very, very strongly. We have no highlights, we have no midtones, we have only shadows. So please remember about this when you are cropping your images. It's not enough to assess your data before cropping the image and assume that it stays the same after you crop your scene during the edit, because this is not true. The data will change. The distribution of the data inside the histogram will change, because of course when you crop and when you are getting rid of brights or midtones, this has to affect the histogram. Okay, so let's start working on our luminosity adjustments. On my background layer, all I want to do is to just soften contrast a little bit. I know that it sounds a little bit strange, because Typically we would go for a bit stronger contrast. However, I feel that the contrast in this image is already super strong and I want to go the opposite route and I want to just soften it. So this image was taken during a sunrise. We had very soft, very beautiful light. However, there is not much mist visible. We have just a little bit of a fog visible here. To be honest, I have no idea why. If you are sort of the weather expert and if you know how you can predict the fog, if you know how to check if the next morning there is going to be a fog over a river or in the mountains, please let me know in the comments to this video. I'm really curious because we've been basically getting up early every morning and sometimes this was super strange. The fog was very dense. At times it seemed that the weather is exactly the same. However, at times there was no fog at all. So that's how it is, and I would like to know why it is like that. Okay, so let's get back to our edit. So I want to soften the contrast in the image. So I have this quite strong light here. The sun was rising just behind those trees. The river was turning to the left. So I want to just go a little bit towards the negative values on my contrast. So this softens the light and I'm getting these nice softer results. So I feel that the contrast at negative around 20 is fine. So this is before, this is the after. If I would go for the opposite direction, this would be mimicking more of sharp light, so that would be more towards the middle of the day, and the whole point of getting up super early is the morning is to have those very soft, very beautiful shadows and this very photogenic light that occurs only during the golden hour in the morning. So this is all what I want to do on my background layer. As the next step, I just want to focus on healing this little bit because I find it quite annoying. So let's just jump over and get the healing brush. Let's maybe reduce the size. When it comes to the flow, let's go for a really high value. When it comes to hardness, we want to work with soft mask, no harsh edges, opacity 100. So all I need to do here is to just paint over this shape as I want to get rid of it. And that's it. So after releasing the cursor, Capture One created automatically the source point, and when it comes to this very dynamic water, this worked really well. So on our heel layer, we got rid of this little branch. So as the next step, I would like to target a little bit of the sky and just maybe recover a bit of the detail that seems to be lost here. So if we just create another field adjustment layer, and if I go down with the exposure, so you can see that in fact we have plenty of beautiful, very soft detail, those morning clouds, and they are not visible when we have our exposure at 0. So I'm going to create a Luma mask and target that area. So let's just rename our layer so we will see what we are doing here. I'm going to call it Sky Luminosity. Okay, and here I just want to create new Luma mask, and let's just switch on the preview of my mask, and I want to restrict it to the highlights. Okay, so let's include a little bit more of those very bright midtones. So let's go for something like this here. Okay, let's go in the opposite direction, and I think this sort of mask will work really well. Let's go for slightly higher radius here. Okay, so this is my mask. Let's apply, and here on this layer I just want to first of all target the highlights. I want to recover the lost detail in the highlights. So I'm going to go with my highlight slider in the HDR tool towards the left. So this will very beautifully bring back all those details. So this is before and this is the after. I think going that far is not necessary. We don't want to darken the sky that much. And the other thing that I would like to stress out here is that when you are manipulating with the highlight slider in the HDR, and if you're pushing it towards the left, sometimes it might be helpful to counterbalance the adjustment with the white slider. So after pushing our highlights towards -65, we don't have any bright highlights anymore over there. So let's just zoom in and let's focus on the sky. So now if I take the color readouts, I have in the brightest place 219, here 219 again. So we can counterbalance our operation on the highlight slider and actually push whites towards the right hand side. So this will bring more dynamic effect because I will be still recovering detail in the sky, but I will be maintaining quite a strong highlights. So I don't want to go too strongly with this one, so I just want to keep the dynamic contrast here in the sky. Let's zoom out and let's see. So this is before and this is the after. Maybe we can go a little bit lower with highlights, and by applying the adjustments on whites slider, we were able to maintain the original light that was there, and the sky is a little bit less flat. So I think it works really well. So again, this is before, this is the after. Okay, so let's take the next step. Now, if I look at the image, let's go hide the browser. Let's get rid of our histogram. So now we have really nice clean space. So we can assess the image that is already quite busy and dynamic. We don't need any distracting elements around. So now I feel that after darkening the sky, I'm tempted to open up those blacks here. So after cropping the image, I have decided that I want to have those stones in my image. I want to have them as the base of my composition at the bottom. And right now they feel a little bit too dark. I would like to have them visible a little bit stronger and play a little bit more important role in the composition, because right now, as you know, the eye will always go towards the brights. So basically we are sort of lost because we will go here, we have this strong contrast between the stone in the middle and the water, then we go towards the sky and we are avoiding dark areas, we are not really searching in those nuances here. So now what we need to focus on is opening the shadows where they need to be open and balancing the whole scene. So I'm going to open the shadows in the bottom. Mostly I will be focusing on the stones, but let's see how this will affect our river. So we will be working with linear gradient tool here, and before we do just that, let's create new field adjustment layer and let's just rename it. Let's call it shadows bottom. Okay. And let's get our linear gradient, and here I just want to create very soft gradient, and let's hit M so we'll see the preview of my mask. Okay, something like this. I don't want to go too far over the sky, but I want this transition to be very soft, and this will give me nice natural effect. I don't want to draw a mask here. I don't want to create luminosity based mask, because this could sort of cut off those trees again, and I want to unify everything. I want everything to work in balance. Let's switch off preview of the mask, and here on my gradient I will be opening the shadows with the HDR tool and with the shadows slider. So let's just move over here and let's start working with these adjustments. So you can notice that if I go too far, I'm making the image overly flat and sort of cartoonish. So let's be cautious here. I'm going to go for Let's say something like this, 29. This is before, this is the after. And just after I've opened the shadows with the HDR tool, I will jump towards the clarity. And with this tool, I will strengthen the mid-tone contrast. So with the clarity tool, I will add a little punch to the image in the mid-tone. So let's just change the methods to punch. I don't mind changing a little bit of saturation, and let's just go towards positive value on clarity. So this is way too much. As I said at the beginning, the light was very soft. We had sunrise, so we want to go for really natural effect. I don't want to go super contrasty here. I think that clarity around 13 works really well, and when it comes to the shadows, let's go down. So let's see, this is before, this is the after. Okay, something around 18, 20 looks really well. So let's switch off the layer and let's compare. This is before opening up the shadows, and this is the after. I feel that I might push my mask a little bit towards the upper edge of the frame because I would like to apply a little bit more of shadows opening here in this area around this branch. So let's push it a little bit further upwards. So this is how my gradient looks like now, and I think this is really good. So this is again before and after. Okay, so by now we've been applying 2 layers where we have applied luminosity adjustments, and if I super quickly hit my Y button, this is before, this is the after, we've already managed to balance the scene quite a lot. And by the way, if you're getting value from my videos, if you're learning something new, I will really appreciate if you leave me a comment under this video, if you like the video, and if you subscribe to my channel. If you hit this little bell icon, that way you will make sure that you won't miss any of my future uploads. Okay, let's go back to the video. So as the very next step, we are going to be working with curves. So with the curves tool, I will be able to target and manipulate in a super precise way my selected luminosity ranges. So let's create new field adjustment layer and let's just rename it. Let's call it curves luminosity. And here let's go and pull our curves out. Let's make them really large. I always stress this out, that the bigger the tool is, the easier it is to apply that adjustment, the easier it is to create those control points because you have more precision. So we will start with the Luma curve. The difference between the Luma and RGB is that if you would be working on RGB, when you will be, let's say, if I create control point in the middle on this diagonal line, and if I push it upwards, I will be opening the midtones, but this affects color as well, and I'm adding a little bit of saturation. So let's just reset this, and on the contrary, on the Luma curve, if I create a control point on the diagonal line, and if I push it upwards, this is opening the midtones, this is adding light to the image. However, I'm not affecting colors, this is not adding any saturation. So this is the difference between the Luma and RGB curve. Okay, so I have opened up my midtones, I've added light, but as you can see, I have pushed my highlights towards the brighter side as well. So I want to just reduce this result. Let's create another control point and let's just anchor my curve a little bit closer to the diagonal line. So that way I'm reducing the operation from affecting my highlights. So you can see that when I'm pushing the control point lower, I'm darkening the bright tones, and let's just make this effect natural. So you don't want to create any strong bends here. You want to have this curve sort of smooth, so that way you won't get any issues and artifacts in the image. So I think this works quite well, and when it comes to the shadows, I feel that they are too bright, and let's just create one more control point and let's darken the brighter shadows. So if I would like to know which area this control point is affecting, I can just hover over the image, and if you take a look at my curve, you can see this vertical orange line. So when I'm moving over different parts of the image, the orange line is moving. So now over the sky, this indicates that I'm over the brightest part in the image. And if I go and let's say hover over the black part here near the stone, the vertical line moves towards the right. So when I have added this control point here, this sort of affects, let's say, those brighter parts in the trees. So I want to just make this part a little bit darker. Let's maybe move it back and create another control point and just make darker those midtones that were a little bit closer to the blacks. So that way we have just a little bit stronger contrast in the image. Okay, and after applying my Luma curve adjustment, this is what happens. I would like to, in fact, open up those shadows a little bit. I feel that they are a little bit too strong. So I would like to introduce just a soft matte effect, and I can do this on my RGB curve. So here I want to create one control point that will anchor my shadows, my dark shadows, and the blacks I want to lift. So I want to just push this point upwards. So this affects overall image. I want to create more control points so they will anchor the curve. So I don't want to definitely affect my midtones. So let's create an anchor point here, and let's lift my highlights just a little bit. So this one here and one more around here. Okay, so we are keeping this very beautiful contrast. We have those beautiful strong highlights, but the shadows are a little bit softer. So that way, working with the curves, RGB and Luma, you can really very precisely fine-tune luminosity adjustments in your image. So I'm not going to apply any mask on this layer. So if I hit M, this layer, these adjustments that I'm performing on curves, they affect the whole image. So let's just switch it off. Let's just switch the adjustment layer off. So this is before, and this is the after. So I have softened the image, I have brightened my midtones. Let's maybe fine-tune this one. It's a little bit too bright. I would like to have those very rich, nice midtones in the river area. Okay, something like this. Let's push this one a little bit lower. So that way I'm harmonizing the curve between the Luma and RGB. I'm sort of lifting the shadows just a little bit here, but the matte effect was added on the RGB curve. Okay, so we are working in a non-destructive way, so we can always get back to our curves and we can fine-tune those global luminosity adjustments if we feel that there is a need to do so. Okay, so now we can take a step further and we will be working with radial gradient. So with this gradient, I will be brightening the river. I will basically changing just a little bit the light pattern that is in the original scene. So let's create another new field adjustment layer. Let's call it Radial Gradient. So you can think about this adjustment as a sort of very subtle vignette, but I won't be darkening the edges. I won't be darkening those areas that I don't want to have prominent in the image. On the other hand, I will be introducing more light towards the center of the image. I want to brighten up those areas, the river, I want to brighten up, I want to open up the shadows in those stones here. Okay, so we can close the curve, so we have a little bit more space here. Let's grab our radial gradient tool and let's draw our radial gradient. So with this one, let's go for something like this. If I hit M, this will give me the preview of the mask. So for sure, I want to have this gradient very nicely distributed over the sky. I don't want to darken those upper corners that way. So I want to make this oval a little bit taller and a little bit wider. Okay, let's widen it still more. I just want to work further on distributing light in the center part of the image, so those areas that are here in the fall-off, they will remain as they are. So by that I mean that they will be a little bit darker and I will have stronger light here in the center. So let's maybe make it still a little bit taller and let's try. So okay, this is my mask. Let's hit M to switch off the preview of the mask. And now on this layer, let's try to open up the exposure a little bit. So let's go for positive value. I'm working with the arrow on my keyboard, so that way I can be super precise. So this is before, this is the after. Let's check the exposure warning. Okay, we are good. So that way we have brightened the area that was covered with the mask. So that way we have more light here in the image gets more inviting. So we have pushed our exposure towards 0.5 and let's again lower contrast. We've already done this on the background layer, but here I want to just soften the light still a little bit further. Let's try to touch the brightness. So, okay, this is too much. I feel that with this small adjustment with the brightness slider, the image still benefits a little bit more. So all these adjustments, they affect, of course, the masked area, and I really like how this affects this place here, the place of meeting the trees, and here our river line, our water. So I have applied the exposure, contrast and brightness. So this is before, this is the after, and I would like to go and touch my HDR tool and the highlight slider to see. Okay, I think this works really well. So I'm again recovering highlights. So I have brightened the sky, and that way I'm making the sky a little bit flat. So by applying negative value on the highlight slider, I am able to again recover those clouds and I'm able to balance the sky and the river. So be careful here. The sky would be almost never darker than anything else in the image unless you have very strong reflections on metal or glass or something like this, but basically making the sky darker than the river here will definitely look very artificial, but I feel we are still safe here. Okay, I can maybe brighten the sky just a notch, so we are not running in trouble here and we are maintaining the natural look for the edit. So on this layer we've introduced more light, we have softened the image, we have revealed the detail that was here in those trees and here in this bunch of grass towards the right hand edge of the image. So again, this is after applying the adjustment, after brightening up the central part of the image, and this is before. Okay, so let's move further, and now I would like to again darken the bottom of my frame, so that way I will create more depth in the image. On our radial gradient light layer, we have introduced more layer towards the center of the image, and now I want to keep the viewer's attention here. I want the viewer to look at that branch, at all those nice structures on the stones at the river, and the bottom of the image, the bottom of the frame is a little bit too bright. I want to darken it so that way I will be nicely framing the scene. So let's create new field adjustment layer and let's call it darken bottom. Okay, and here I can maybe quickly work with linear gradient. You can use brush if you want to just quickly paint the mask, but the linear gradient will just let me to distribute that mask very evenly here when I'm touching the middle of the frame. So if I would be working with my brush, I could be a little bit less precise. So, okay, I think it works nice. Okay, I want to have this gradient very smooth and basically affect just the bottom of the image. So here I want to go for negative exposure. So let's hit M and hide the preview of the mask. So let's go towards the exposure tool, exposure slider, and let's go for negative value. Nothing really strong. Okay, let's go for maybe something like negative 0.5, and I want to fine-tune the mask because now I have darkened those stones, but I think they are really important. They create those nice leading lines, and I want to keep them as they were, so I don't want to darken them that way. I would like to apply the darkening here on the bottom part, just to darken those stones that were visible underwater. Here, this edge, there is nothing really super interesting going on, but these stones here, those nice long stones, I want to keep in light. So let's just go for the eraser. So this is preview of our mask, and now let's hit E on the keyboard, or you can just grab the eraser from here, and I'm going to get rid of the mask. I'm going to softly erase the mask from that area that I want to keep brighter. So let's increase size of the brush, right click on the image, and that way you can access the eraser settings or brush settings. Now we are working with eraser, so it is eraser. Let's go for a larger size and way lower flow because I want to make this effect blending nicely with the rest of the adjustments. So let's just start working here, and let's just remove the mask from those stones visible here. Okay, I have some lagging here, so let's be careful and let's remove the darkening from that part, maybe a little bit from the part of the stone. So let's go for lower flow. We can zoom in and let's pan around. So let's go again, eraser, lower size. We have now lower flow, so I can remove the mask very softly in a very controlled way. Okay, so I don't want to have those stones scattered in terms of luminosity, of course, because I cannot change their position. Okay, but something like this. So let's hit M to hide the preview of the mask, and let's switch off the layer. So this is the adjustment. This is darkening the bottom. So you can see how this very nicely closes the composition. So this creates a sort of arc here. So we are drawing the viewer's eye, the viewer's attention with these leading lines inside. So here is our sketch from the very beginning of this edit. So we are drawing the viewer's attention inside now. So now we can focus on the stone, we can focus on playing with the river, with the water, and now I would like to actually put emphasis on this branch because it is very strong here. If we wouldn't have this branch, the composition, the image will be way less dynamic. So since we already have this branch here, why not to take advantage of it, and why not to make it even stronger? So I'm going to create another adjustment layer, and on this layer I will be applying a little bit of dodging around the shape of this branch to make it stand out stronger. Because the branch is quite dark, the foliage, all those bushes here, they are quite dark as well, and it is visible here when it contrasts with those trees in a distance, but we can enhance this shape, we can make it stand out stronger by applying just a little bit of dodging here. So let's do just that. Let's create new empty adjustment layer, and let's just rename it. Let's call it dodge. And here on this layer, I'm going to apply a curve. So here are our curves. Let's go for Luma. If we would be doing this on RGB curve in all these areas that we'll be dodging, we will affect saturation, and this could create not natural sort of clashing effect. The background is super busy, so in case of image like this wouldn't be strongly visible, but if you had a plain, just flat background, or maybe a piece of fabric, and you would like to perform operation like this, that you want to dodge around the subject to make it stand out stronger, you definitely don't want to go for the RGB curve, because in all these areas where you will be dodging, you would affect the colors and you will basically make them stronger. You would enhance saturation, and we don't want to do this. So let me just work on the Luma curve, and let's create one control point. Let's push it upwards, and now let me switch towards my tablet. I will be working with a brush, so let's hit B, and here we will be playing around with a brush. So let's go with smaller size, let's go with a little bit higher flow, and all I want to do here is to just paint around that branch. So as you can see, I'm brightening those areas that are behind the branch, and that way I will be making it stand out way stronger. So with this sort of adjustments with dodging, the tendency is that we are not really seeing the result. When we are building up this effect, it seems that nothing is really happening, but if I just switch this layer, you can see how strong this adjustment already is. So we don't want to introduce too much light. I want to go for eraser now and get rid of the light here, because I don't want to draw viewers' attention towards those shapes here on the right hand side. All I want to do is to just paint around the branch with my brush to make it stand out a little bit stronger by enhancing the contrast between the branch and the background. Okay, the computer is lagging again, but we'll manage. So let's just paint around like this. If I hit M, you will see the preview of my mask, so I can repeat this around here. Try not to create any sort of holes, so maybe I went a little bit too strongly here, but let's try. So let's zoom out and let's switch off our dodging layer. Let's switch it on. Okay, so even though I'm not super precise, the background, that foliage behind, is that busy that it's really almost impossible to notice that there were any manipulations applied, but this helps us to bring out the branch. So the element is already present in the image, and why not make it stronger? Why not to use this shape to work for our composition? Okay, let's just again see the before and after. Here we can maybe blend the brightening a little bit. Okay, let's now zoom out and let's see the before and after. So this is before brightening the background behind the branch, and this is the after. So I feel that this makes this branch stand out way stronger, and it adds this nice accent to the image. So we've been working on dodging on this layer. If you wanted, you could dodge a little bit more. So as always with dodging and burning, you can be as precise as you want, and you can spend as much time as you want. Here I feel we could apply just a little bit of dodging on those trees. Okay, maybe that's a little bit too strong, so I want to lower my flow. I had 10, now I've changed it to 7. Just to add a little bit more dimension, a little bit more depth. So I'm brightening the trees in those areas where they were already touched by the light, and that way I'm shaping them. So the contrast between those areas in the shadow and those areas that were touched by the morning light is increasing, and that way that shape gets more dynamic. I could do this with luminosity mask, but since I've already created the dodging layer, I feel that we can use it for this purpose as well. So let's see before and after. Okay, it looks really good. Let's add a little bit more light here. And okay, I'm tempted to go over the stones. I'm not going to do this. Maybe just a little bit of extra light on this one, since it's in the center of our frame, and this is the element to which the eye goes towards. So let's just make it just a little bit brighter, and I think that's it. So let's see again, before applying our dodging and after. Okay, so that way, by applying several different layers with basically on all of them we have purely luminosity adjustments, we went from this original scene with this image, so this is before, to this stage. This is the after. So in terms of luminosity, I'm very happy with the direction we took the image. So now let's start working on color. So let's create one more adjustment layer and let's just rename it. Let's call it color. And here I want to be really simple, as I have promised you at the beginning of this edit. We are going to keep things simple, so nothing really complex. We will be playing a little bit with the skin tone tab because I want to add a little bit more yellowy tones to the image. So right now the image is quite cold. We have those blue waters, they are all towards the magenta even here, and then we have those greens. So I feel that warming up the image a little bit will benefit in overall the composition, because the sun was rising, the light was very soft, very nice, with a sort of peachy tone, but it is gone here. So I want to introduce a little bit more of the soft light, and before I do that I will be manipulating a bit with the color here. So I want to push some of the greens that were already turning yellow. This was quite early stage of autumn at the last week of September, so I can just push those parts that were turning already yellow. I can push them towards more yellowy tone, and this will very beautifully work with the blues that we have here. As you remember, yellow and blue are opposite colors on the color wheel. They complement each other and they always work well when they are together. Let's maybe start with color balance. So that way we will apply the general adjustments on color. We will start with the bigger adjustments with no mask, and then we will start fine-tuning the colors with the skin tone tab. So with the color balance tool, let's start with the master tab. So here, as I said, we have quite a lot of greens, those blues, and we will be further on introducing the yellow color. So right now, let's actually go for quite cool tone here. So I'm going to enhance those greens. So something like this. I don't want to go too far, but I don't want to make the image warm and orange all over. So let's keep those greens here. Let's maybe go for just a little bit lower saturation. Okay, let's now jump over to our shadows tab. So here, if I hover over the shadows and if I take a look at the color readouts, we can see that they are neutral, and I feel that the image is already quite rich in color, so I don't want to introduce any tone here. All I want to do is to still lift those shadows a little bit, because with the color balance tool you can add tint to the selected luminosity range, or you can still manipulate with the luminosity adjustment. So here I have another chance to apply adjustments on selected luminosity range, so I want to lift those shadows just a notch. So this is my shadows. Let's now jump over to the midtone tab, and when it comes to the midtones, I want to go for the opposite, and I want to darken the midtones, and I want to add orange tone here. So I want to warm them up. Something like this, a little bit maybe more towards the orange, and let's go higher up here. So let's go for stronger saturation. If you want to be super precise, you can work with the slider here. So if you go upwards, you will be adding saturation. If you go downwards, you will be reducing the amount of saturation. So I want to go for something like this. So I have darkened my midtone. And when it comes to the highlights, let's maybe brighten them up just a touch. Okay, I think that the image is a little bit too green, so I'm going to lower saturation for the tone. I want to keep it, but not that strong in the image. Okay, so far on our color layer, we've been working with the color balance tool. So we pushed the image towards warmer tones. So here we have these beautiful sort of silverish greens. I'm talking about the area here. So this is before the colors were more towards the magenta, and now we went towards those greenish silverish tones. So now we can jump over to our color editor and we can focus on the skin tone tab. So I'm going to use this tool to introduce a little bit of yellow tones here in the selected areas in the foliage. So let's grab our picker and let's sample around here. So that way I will be telling Capture One to push all the colors that are inside my selection. So let's first of all click on this icon. So we'll make sure that the whole saturation range is included. And now we can extend this selection. So next, when we will be manipulating with these values, we will be telling Capture One to affect all the tones that are included here in this slice. So with the first group of adjustments, amount, I will be basically creating the desired color. So when it comes to the hue, if I go towards the right, I'm adding green. So looking inside the color wheel, I will be going counterclockwise. I want to go the opposite way. I want to go clockwise. I want to add more yellow. I want to add more orange to my selected tones, so they will turn more autumny. So now I made them greener. So basically I sort of turned back time. They turned greener than they were in reality, and I want to push them a little bit to the future, I would say. So I'm making them more yellow, and here I will go for the value around -4. When it comes to saturation, I don't feel I will be making any changes here, and I want to make them a little bit brighter just to put stronger emphasis on the color. So this is what I've done with these 3 sliders amount. And now when it comes to uniformity, I will be telling Capture One to take care of all the colors that are inside my slice and unify them towards the selected hue. So here I have picked this sort of brownish greenish tone, and I really like the step that I'm going to perform in a second. So let's go for positive values with this. I can now take the point here that was created by my initial sample in the image, and I can move it towards any other place inside color wheel. So now I'm basically telling Capture One that I want all these colors that are inside my selection to push them towards this tone. So if I would like to push everything towards the green, I would position my sample here. You can see how this is affecting the image, and I want to go the opposite direction. I want to push this hue towards those saturated, very nice colors, something between orange and yellow. The orange looks a bit too strong, so something maybe around here. So I can narrow the selection. Okay, so let's now fine-tune this. When it comes to saturation, let's reset. When it comes to the hue, so the further I will be pushing my hue slider, the further Capture One will unify all these colors inside my selection towards this desired hue. So I feel that this is way too much. This is creating quite artificial effect. I like the browns though that appeared here and in the water, but this looks a bit strange that the foliage to the right hand side is already that brown yellow and the trees are green. I could include more of the greens here by extending this part, but I don't really like this result. Let's keep it as it was, and let's instead go lower with the value for hue. So we will just introduce a little bit of yellows, but without pushing everything too strongly. When it comes to saturation, let's see. No, I think that it's nice when the saturation was kept at 0 when we are not affecting uniformity of saturation. So that way with the skin tone tab we have affected colors quite strongly. So now if we switch off the whole layer on which we've been working on color grading, we can see this is the image before and this is the image after. So we've been applying quite soft, quite subtle change in terms of color, but even with those subtle changes, even with such a subtle adjustments, the result is quite strong, quite spectacular. So, okay, let's maybe make the layers a little bit bigger here, and again, we can see that on those previous layers we've been working on luminosity adjustments. This is the starting point. After applying all the luminosity adjustments, this is what we have achieved. And now on this layer, we've been working on color. Okay, so at this point, I feel that the image that we have created looks quite good. I am very happy with the direction we have taken it. So again, this is before, this is the after. So all we need to do now is to just fine-tune those luminosity adjustments to add few last final touches. So first of all, I would like to add a little bit of targeted sharpening. I would like to apply it only to the central part of the image, because after working on our layer with dodging, after brightening that part, this area here around the branch and the shape, it got really strong, and this is sort of making the right hand side of the frame a little bit too heavy in comparison to the left. So I'm going to apply targeted sharpening to the middle part of the image, and hopefully this will balance out the composition. So let's create new field adjustment layer and let's call it sharpening. Okay, so let's work first without mask. So I'm moving over towards the sharpening tool, and here I want to apply sharpening. Before we do anything related to sharpening or clarity, let's increase magnification level, because it's always a good idea to look at the image at least at 100%, or if you are at Retina display at 200. So I want to focus here on this part of the image. So let's apply a bit of sharpening. So I'm pushing my slider to the right. Okay, something around 300 looks well. So this is before and this is the after. Okay, and beside applying sharpening, let's zoom out. Let's jump over to my exposure tab, and here I would like to add a little bit of clarity as well. So let's zoom in again and let's go for positive value. Let's zoom out to judge the overall effect. Okay, this is adding this nice punch here. Let's go for stronger value, and now let's mask it out. So I'm now applying this overall to the layer. So let's just right click and hit invert mask, and let's now go for a brush and go for a larger size, and we'll be painting in sharpening just to the center of the image. So I want to have it applied to the stones, to those stones here, to the water, and keep the rest of the image softer. Okay, let's now reduce flow and let's paint a little bit over here as well, so we won't have such a dramatic shift. The image was taken with quite a shallow depth of field. You can see here the aperture 4. So the way the stones were softened in the original frame, in the original raw file, looks natural. Okay, so on this layer I have applied sharpening and I have added a little bit of punch with clarity. So this is the one of the steps that I wanted to take. And I think that introducing a bit of warmer light to my highlights will add a nice touch to this image as well, because we have the trees that are quite cold, green, the water is blue, we have a little bit of yellows. So I would like to work towards unifying the whole composition. So if I zoom out, this is my overall frame, and I think that I might just warm up those highlights a little bit. This will warm up those highlights in the water as well, and this will nicely link water with the sky. So we won't have such a strong division. So let's try. Let's create new field adjustment layer and let's rename it to warm light. And here I want to create luminosity mask. Super quick. Let's switch on the mask. So I want this mask to affect only my highlights, and I want it to be quite soft. So let's include the water, and we can fine-tune this if this will give us too strong effect, but let's start with something like this. So let's now jump over to the color balance tool. Let's just pull it out, and here let's start with highlights. So here I want to introduce some of that peachy tone that I was talking about at the beginning. So this sort of hue was visible when I was taking the picture. Very, very subtle, but nice warm light that brings you some warmth after you are waiting for the sunrise in the cold weather. So this is before, this is the after. Very nice. And let's now go to master and let's see. So this will strengthen the effect, and I think this might be too much, but something like this. So this will be before and after. So overall, when I have the white background as a working space in Capture One, this allows me to judge very nicely my luminosity adjustments, because if I would go for black, everything looks good, everything's popping out, nice contrast, but actually when I'm having my white border, white background, I feel that my luminosities need just a touch of fine-tuning. I would like to make them a little bit cleaner, a little bit brighter. So I have added this yellow tone. This is before, this is the after, which I like, but I would like to make it a little bit brighter. So let's try to do this on my highlights. So I'm just brightening the highlights, and let's try not to flatten the sky. So let's see before and after. Okay, I think this works really well. We can jump over to the background and try to push the white point on the levels, but we have to be careful not to overdo this. Okay, so maybe something like this, and maybe we will go lower with the highlights here. No, actually this worked quite well. So we need to just make all these tools work together for the benefit of the image. Okay, so this is the master channel, a bit of warm tone. Let's switch off the layer on and off. Okay, I think it looks really, really nice. That's the result I wanted to get. So the highlights are no more neutral. We have a little bit of warmer light, and this just very nicely unifies the image all together. So let's just maybe add a bit of sharpening overall to the whole image. So we can, let's just create new field adjustment layer, so we can always reduce it with opacity if we go too far. So let's just rename it, let's call it sharpening, and let's zoom in. So we are looking at 100% magnification level. Let's get rid of this, and let's go for just a bit of sharpening here. So this adds up to the sharpening that we have already applied here in the center, but I think it works well. So this is before applying sharpening, and this is the after, and we may add a little bit of film grain simulation, because I have opened up those shadows quite strongly, and that way we have quite a lot of noise here in the shadow area. So let's go for silver rich, and let's apply a bit of film grain to our image. Let's zoom out. So this is before the Capture One is calculating the film grain. So this is before, this is the after. The image is quite busy, so it's not very strongly visible here with all these textures and all those strong contrast between the light, those bright reflections and the shadow. But here in the sky, the film grain is definitely visible. So this is before, the sky is soft, and this is the after. So we can maybe reduce it a notch, and this is before the sharpening, and this is the after. Okay, so let's zoom out, and basically this is it. The only thing that I'm tempted to do is, after applying all the color grading, to my liking the image is a little bit too saturated. So I would just go back to my color layer. Let's just switch it off and on. So I love the direction that I took. I like the way the image looks warmer now, but I just want to make one last thing in my color editor. Let's just maybe add it as I got rid of it. So color editor, and here in the advanced tab, I want to add the generic color wheel, and I want to go down with saturation. So let's see. So that way, after reducing saturation, after reducing the strong impact that the color has on the image, there is more attention going towards all these nuances, all these textures, and all the game of light and shadow. So it depends. You might desaturate it, or you might leave it in color. I love black and white photography, and very often when I'm working with quite complex images, complex in terms of textures, I'm really tempted to go down with color and to let the textures speak for themselves without the strong color impact. So it depends. You can let me know in the comments which version you prefer. I think it depends on day as well. Today I might say I like this one better. On the other day I might go for the color. So this is always excellent idea. You can just create new clone variant. So clone variant, and on this one you may go for lowered saturation, and on the previous version you might just switch it off, and you can keep these two different versions on your hard drive, and you can export whichever you feel that you need for the moment. And it's worth mentioning that when you are creating new variants of your images, this doesn't take space on the hard drive. So basically all the data, all the adjustments that we have performed is recorded in a text document, so you can create as many variants as you want, and you can play around with these colors. You can create different color versions, and it won't be killing your storage space. Okay, so this is it for today. I hope you have learned some new things from this edit. I hope I have managed to convince you that you don't need really complex adjustments when it comes to photo editing, that when with specific images you can really stick to one or two methods. So in case of this image, we've been focusing primarily on luminosity adjustment. So again, if I hit Y, so this is our starting point, this is the original raw file, and this is our image after applying all the adjustments. So I would say, beside this layer on which one we've been working on color, all the rest was done with luminosity adjustments. We've been applying a little bit of sharpening and clarity, but apart from this, we've been basically enhancing light or enhancing shadow. So this is all about the play of light and shadow. So as always, I'm very curious about your feedback. Please leave me comments under this video. I reply to every comment that I get on YouTube. So thank you very much for watching. This was Kasia Zmokla from Digital Art Classes, and I will see you very soon in the next video.